You describe your field of study or the work that you do in the area of psychoneurobiology. I'd love for you to maybe unpack a little bit about what that actually is and how what attracted you to psychoneurobiology work.
So that is, so psycho stands for mind, neuro for brain, biology for body. And there's a three separate components that work together to create the networks that drive how we function as human beings. And we are able to control that network. And so the work that I do and have been doing for 38 years now is understanding how that network works and how we can influence and make the necessary changes in the networks that drive us. So if there's something that's driving us in the wrong direction and creating disruption in our life, leading to more extreme mental health challenges, to be able to recognize those signals and then to track that back to the source and in the mind, brain, and body, and then to reconstruct that. So psychoneurobiology looks at how to do that, and it specifically looking at how does information get into the mind, brain, body network and how they're connected. So if my mind is messy and I'm having a messy experience, I'm not managing that. What does that look like in the brain? What does that look like in the body? And how does that play out into our life? And then how can we control that? So it's a form of it's basically falls under the realm of neuroscience, but it's much more specific, where it's not just neuroscience. Classical neuroscience looks at brain producing mind. This is looking at, no, the brain can't produce the mind because the brain's a physical organ. When you die, your brain dies. So your mind is separate from your brain, and it actually drives your brain and drives your body and therefore the outputs.
Absolutely. I love all that. And I think what I'm hearing from what you said is it's really the mind that is driving all of this. Like if you have a messy, unhealthy mind, it's going to lead to an unhealthy, messy body. Now, does it work in reverse though? I'm a fitness guy. I got a background in health and fitness, competed in bodybuilding, did a lot of fitness coaching. I've always believed that, you can't have a healthy mind without a healthy body. Would that fall into your understanding, or at least what you've uncovered in the research?
Well, yes. So in a way, yes, it's more of a feedback loop. So mind is first. So mind is good. After mind, you're dead. So your mind is your aliveness. So the decision to work on your body is a mind-driven decision. The decision to persist and keep working on your body in terms of exercise, healthy eating, all that kind of thing, that is mind-driven. And then so you make the decision, you do the exercise, you eat the healthy food, mind-driven. You can't use your body without your mind because you're dead. So if you look at it like that, your first step is to make the decision with your mind to look after your body and then to actually do what you need to do to look after your body. And that then feeds back into the mind. And that's a level of the mind brain body relationship. And then on top of that, we're also using our mind to deal with our thoughts and to deal with our reactions to life and understand what we've been exposed to and how that impacts us, which is also mind driven. So it's always mind first and then brain and body. And then there's feedback. So if we don't look after our brain and our body, and we don't manage our mind, or if we're managing our mind, but we're not looking after the brain and the body, then the mind's got to work through a damaged brain and body, which makes it so much more difficult. Also, if our brain and body are unhealthy, it's feeding back and increasing the messiness in the mind. So it works both ways. Once you're dead, none of that counts. But basically, while you're alive, we need to be recognizing with our mind the impact of a brain and body that's not healthy and recognize that, okay, this could be contributing to my mind issues, make a decision of my mind to address the brain and body health. And then if there's still stuff left over, which there always is, because that's just how we are as humans, then address that level of the mental health challenge or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve.
We spent a lot of time on this on the last episode, but I think that for me at least, there was a point where we looked at mind and brain almost as interchangeable, right? Are there still areas of science or still people that see it, because the way that you're explaining it, it's like the mind is completely separate. Like that's what drives our aliveness. Like when did we begin to understand that there was a separation of these two?
So this is ancient, thousands of years. For thousands of years, there was always the understanding from the ancient philosophers and the spiritual teachers and all those texts that the mind and the brain were separate. And it was only honestly, in around 50 years ago, and kind of, I actually think it's less. It's around, it's not, I think, from the science, it's a little bit more like 40 years ago, with the advent of understanding brain technology, that we started thinking, started seeing, well, not we, I don't do that, but there was a branch of science started seeing specifically neuroscience, that now we can look inside the brain. Therefore, the brain is the organ of mental health. Therefore, the brain is producing thoughts. The brain is free will is an illusion. And a whole sort of body of science grew in the last 40 years. The advent of brain technology was around the mid 90s, and it's pretty much from the mid 90s till now that neuroscientific approach became very, very dominant. It's because it's easy to measure because you can see things, and but the measurements have been actually pretty inaccurate because you can't really look at a any kind of brain technology and say, well, that means that you're thinking this, or you're not reading your thoughts. We also can't look at how a person is showing up and saying, oh, well, it's because of some sort of mechanical damage in the brain. Sure, a mechanical damage in the brain from a traumatic brain injury or sports injury will definitely impact your emotions, and from that, and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and those kinds of birth trauma, they definitely will impact, obviously, cognitive, emotional, etc., etc. But when we talk about people's mental health and we've eliminated those potential physical contributors, we're left with people in life and their life experiences. And because our life experiences are experienced by the mind, and the mind puts them into the brain as a form of energy, and the brain then is activated to respond. That is the correct way around. It's not the other way around. And the evidence for that is there's so much evidence for that. Because if you take, like, the standard neuroscientific experiment will be along the lines of, let's keep getting people in a lab and getting them to do something, and then looking at what their brain is, how their brain is responding. The interpretation of that is, oh, the brain made them do it, but they first had to do something and be alive and do something like answer some questions or look at some pictures. So they were doing something with their aliveness, and the brain measurement was the response that was being measured. So we've got to look at it. What came first? It's a chicken and egg situation. In this case, the mind comes first, and the brain is basically responding. It's not causing. And so that's where it's a pretty new thing. It's only the last 40 years that people have seen the mind and brain as the same thing.